True spirit of Churchill and Britain, we have taken a tea break in the middle.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't be the Britain course without tea. And we're moving on to the 2021 paper. Then, do you want to do A and C or B and D? What do you want to do?
I can kick off if you like.
Yeah, go on, then you can do A then. So again, so I'll do the questions. So again, using these four sources in historical context, assess how far they support the view that Churchill was successful in managing his relations with other wartime leaders. So that, again, the focal point is successful, managing relations, other wartime leaders. So that's basically from our course, Stalin, de Gaulle, and Roosevelt. Off you go with
Yeah.
sourcing.
Okay, source A senior diplomat describes a meeting between Churchill and Stalin. I found Winston and Stalin sitting with a heavily laden board between them, food of all kinds crowned by a suckling pig and innumerable bottles. Everyone seemed to be as merry as a marriage bell. I think the two great men really made contact and got on terms. Certainly, Winston was impressed, and I think that feeling was reciprocated. Anyhow, conditions have been established in which messages exchanged between the two will mean twice as much or more than they did before.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
four now.
I think does it support the claim in the question or not? Obviously it does. It's very positive.
Yeah.
So tick, positive sentence that suggests that I think is the last sentence. Conditions have been established in which messages exchanged between the two will mean twice as much or more than they did before.
Yeah, I think the two great men really made contact and got on terms, I think, as well is important. So I think both of those, you can pull out, you only need one quote, but you can pull out a couple of bits, so you can always pull out, but just take the key
Yeah,
bits. Yeah, I agree with that.
that would definitely work.
Clearly support.
And I should have read the last bit, I keep
Oh,
forgetting.
sorry.
So Alexander Cadogan. Is that how you pronounce it?
Cadogan, I think,
Cadogan?
if it's like the pub in Chelsea, which I assume is probably his pub. Um,
I, Diary, August 1942.
yeah. All right, so I'll take on source B. De Gaulle recalls a meeting with Churchill in September 1942. Mr.
French accent, please.
Huh?
French accent, please.
Mr. Churchill attacked me in a bitter and highly emotional way. When I pointed out is that the establishment of a British-controlled administration in Madagascar would constitute an interference with the rights of France. He exclaimed furiously, "You claim to be France. You are not France. I do not recognize you as France." I interrupted him. "If in your eyes I am not a representative of France, why and with what right are you dealing with me?" Mr. Churchill did not reply. De Gaulle Memoirs, 1952.
Good one, James.
Yeah,
I'll pay that. I'll pay that.
my
That's
time
a pretty
living in
good French
France
accent.
probably get proper attempt at a French accent. So yeah, obviously it's doesn't support. I think it starts off with he attacked me in a bitter and highly emotional way, and from there it only goes down.
Doesn't say, yeah, it's not promising from the very beginning.
Yeah, if a student cannot work out if this one's supports it or not, you need to be doing a different A level. So yeah, I think this one is quite a nice one. So yeah, that one clearly does not support the fact that he was successful in managing relations. Yeah, cool. And in every sentence, but I think he starts off with the main one and it goes from there. Yeah, go on and see then for you.
Okay, so source there we have Churchill's doctor writes about the relationship between the wartime leaders at the time of the Tehran conference.
Him again.
Churchill's doctor, yeah.
Yeah.
When
Source
Roosevelt
banking.
was when Roosevelt was settled into his quarters, Stalin lost no time in calling on him. Roosevelt said that he was anxious to relieve the pressure on the Russian front by invading France. Stalin expressed his gratification. He went on to say that he hoped Malaya, Burma, and other British colonies would soon be educated in the arts of self-government. When I saw the Prime Minister this morning, he was plainly put out. It seemed that he had sent a note to the President suggesting they should lunch together, but the President's answer was a polite no. It is not like him, the PM murmured. This did not prevent the President seeing Stalin alone after lunch. Lord Moran, Diary 28 and 29th of November 1943. sense of deja vu with this one.
Yeah, but different
James.
questions, so it's dealing with different angles.
So different
That's
questions.
what
Yeah.
students have to be aware as well. You might see the same, the letter, Chamberlain's letter to his sister comes up in a million exams. But if it's a different question, it's a different angle of it. It's going to be different points that are relevant. So,
Yeah. 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 And the accuracy can vary depending on the
yeah,
question, same
yeah,
source.
yeah, yeah. And also the problem.
Um,
Yeah,
and the provenance too. Yeah. Okay. So, is positive or negative? Clearly negative.
yeah, yeah. Language.
Um, I had. It seems that he had sent a note to the president suggesting they should lunch together, but the president's answer was a polite no.
Yeah. So again, it is the same language. This one doesn't always
So
have to be. But in terms of provenance and changing, the example I always use is Hitler. Like, because if it's like Hitler writing about Jewish population of Germany, if the question is how accurate is this as an assessment of Jewish people, it's obviously inaccurate and unreliable. But if it's a source, if the question was how accurate is this on the Nazis' opinions on Jewish population, it's incredibly accurate and incredibly reliable.
yeah,
So it really
right,
depends what the question is and what you're trying to
right,
improve. Every source is accurate and reliable in the right, well, is useful at least in the right context.
right,
So, um,
right.
yeah, all right. And then source D, Churchill pays tribute to Roosevelt a few days after the president's death. I conceived an admiration for him as a statesman, a man of affairs, and a war leader. I had the utmost confidence in his upright, inspiring character and outlook, and a personal regard and affection for him, far beyond my power to express today. He devised the extraordinary measure of assistance called Lend-Lease, which will stand forth as the most unsordid financial act of any country in all history. We drew up together the Atlantic Charter, which will, I trust, long remain a guide for both our peoples and other peoples in the world. For us, it remains only to say that in Franklin Roosevelt there dies the greatest American who has ever brought help and comfort from the New World to the Old. Churchill addresses to Parliament, 17th April 1945. Obviously, this is really supportive that the relationship was good. It's saying they drew up the Atlantic Charter together, that what they did will long remain like in history, basically, and that he's the greatest American ever brought help to the world. So I think it's clear that this supports the fact that he had good relations.
Agreed.
In terms of ranking them, I would go most supportive D, then A, then C, then B. Do you agree?
Okay. Most supported D, then A.
Yeah. So I think they're the two supportive ones. You've got to go one of them, but I think D is more than A.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
then when
D,
the two that don't.
A, and then the two that don't, I think C and then B.
Yeah,
B
I
would be
would, because
would be the most negative.
B is to go losing his nut. So like, still angry many years, 14 years later.
That's
Not,
right.
not a man to hold a grudge to go. Um,
Oh no, no,
no.
not at
Cool.
all.
So we'll start with D. Do you want me to take care of D and then?
Sure, you go
Yeah.
and then I'll take the
Okay.
next one.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, cool. So source D in terms of accuracy, obviously it is accurate that Lend-Lease was designed by FDR and Lend-Lease was really important without that, about the loading of food and equipment, military equipment to the war would be really difficult, especially to the Russians. That they drew up the Atlantic Charter together is true, but they definitely disagreed on the Atlantic Charter. And this is brushed over here. And again, he's saying that it will be a guide for peoples. Again, Churchill always focused on the democratic part of that and not on the breakup of the empire. So this glosses over all of the differences. It does talk about where they were on the same page, but doesn't talk at all about any of the differences they had throughout the war. So it's accurate in where they agreed, but inaccurate by omission in terms of what it's not. And that obviously comes from the provenance. This is so it's fairly accurate on the positive side of what their registration was, but it omits too many things. Provenance, obviously, it's an address to Parliament just after Roosevelt's dead. So Churchill's hardly going to come out on the death of the president and make a speech while he's still prime minister and while they still need the Americans to help them in the war to come out and say, you
You-
know what, me and Roosevelt didn't agree on lots of, he snubbed me at Tehran. I've got a personal beef with him. What a horrible man. I'm glad he's
Are,
dead.
yeah.
So it's
Are there
hard.
any examples? Are there any examples of saying nasty things about statesmen
They've just
that you're
died.
aware of?
Trump on
I
John
don't think so.
McCain.
Oh, really? What did he
Yeah.
say?
Trump said McCain was no war hero after he died, I think. He said he was
Oh,
like a coward
but
because he was
that
captured.
wasn't at his funeral.
No, probably not. This is
No.
not his funeral. This is addressing Parliament.
Oh, so just a pub. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but
Okay.
they're still like, but they're
Yeah.
still obviously at war. War hasn't ended yet, 1945. You can't really critique America needs Truman's help to bring it
No.
home. And I mean, as you do, you at someone's death, you focus on the point, and they are accurate, the positives. It's just obviously it's not going to be accurate for really describing the relationship because of the nature of what it is and when it is. So I
Yeah.
think it's unreliable because of why and how he's speaking. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I think so. I agree.
Yeah. So I would say
So,
somewhat accurate, not very reliable.
okay. So the next most accurate, most positive, I should say, is
Yeah.
source A. You
Yeah.
agreed, correct?
Yeah.
How accurate is it? Um, so is it? We will start with the accuracy and then go to the
Yeah. Yeah.
provenance.
Accuracy first, then provenance. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's in 1942.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah. The date is still important for context.
the
You do
date is
need
still
to,
the state
yeah,
is
for
still
accuracy. Yeah.
the date is still put. So we don't have this is the point in which Russia is just
Yeah.
entered the war. Clearly, there's a lot to be gained from an alliance between the Allies and Russia against Germany. So I would say it's accurate to the extent that clearly Churchill and Stalin had some degree of say good relations,
Hmm.
chumminess,
Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It would be inaccurate to think this is a concrete picture of the way that their relationship was in the years following.
Yeah. And also the provenance will be that as
Particularly
well. So.
right. So I would say fairly accurate,
Yeah,
at least for
on
now,
what it covers. Yeah, I think that's the
on what
key.
it
It's
covers.
only because it's what that person would know, and we'll deal with that with the provenance. But yeah, they did like drinking. They both respected each other because they thought they were very patriotic and like very
Right.
defending of their own country. So they kind of obviously the key differences would be on that they had was opening the Western Front, but that wouldn't have happened yet by 1942 because they only just came in. So
Yeah.
was unaware that Church was going to leave him hanging. And the other one is ideology, but at that
Well, and the
point,
whole betrayal thing. I mean, the
yeah,
whole Ribbentrop-Molotov pact,
yeah.
where
Well, the
we
ideology over
sweep that under the carpet.
communism, capitalism, but I think at this point, both of them realized fascists were a bigger problem. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So I think it's like,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. At this point, it was imperative that they could cooperate
yeah,
and
yeah,
suggest that they could and did.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And they got on well on a personal level, but again, it's only really covering the personal level, and that do you want to take care of
yeah,
provenance?
yeah. So provenance is it reliable?
It's accurate but limited, we would say. It's accurate in the
It's
limited
accurate,
element
but
it's covering.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I would also say it's reliable. It's
yeah,
a diary. It's
yeah,
written contemporaneously at the time,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
1942. It's a senior diplomat who would have obviously had a fairly decent access to these meetings, to these discussions.
Yeah.
He's an eyewitness actually
Yeah, yeah,
to this dinner party. So yeah, I think the provenance is very reliable.
yeah. I think the key with this one is it's like in what it covers, it's accurate and reliable because he would have seen that he reporting on it. That was their first meeting. They did get on very well on a personal level. They liked each other personally, unlike FDR and Churchill didn't. But the key is he's a diplomat, so he wouldn't have had access to the strategic military tactics that was the big dividing point between those two anyway, and other stuff. So he would only have been involved in the personal element, which was good between those two. He wouldn't. I don't think
Sure.
he would have had access to the military bit, which is where the real divides start kicking in, and they don't kick in at that point. You can see that it's in source C, so like
Yeah.
over a year
And
later,
source
where
C is 1943,
yeah,
November
so that shows by
1943.
that point it shows where the relationships become strained.
Sure.
But in 42, it's accurate. In 42, they have gone on pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And
Okay.
I'll take care of source C then. So again, is it accurate? We talked about this before. Yeah, it's accurate. We know that again, and like we pointed out, the relationship has now deteriorated between both America and Soviet Union with Britain, because by the Tehran conference, they're wanting to open up the Western Front, agree to the D-Day landings, and they've sidelined Churchill because they realize that he's still following his Mediterranean strategy, going up through Italy, and his main objective is again the preservation of the British Empire. He's not really interested in putting British soldiers on the ground to end this war as fast as he could. And like Stalin's been left hanging for a year and a half by this point on his own, like doing all the dying, and the Americans are keen and anxious to end the war. And they've lost faith in Churchill's leadership on that. And I think that's the first time they get to meet the big three all together. They kind of sideline. I mean, it shows also Stalin saying about Malaya, Burma, British colonies getting educated in self-government suggests that, again, the Soviet Union was on the American side with the Atlantic Charter about ending empire, which was true, because both of them were.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fantastic line when he went on to say that he hoped Malaya, Burma, and other British colonies would soon be educated in the arts of self-government.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the cynicism in that statement is simply astonishing.
Yeah,
Given, of course, given the Soviet Union's rapacious
yeah.
stance towards Eastern Europe, for example.
Yeah, as a buffer zone though.
Self-government.
As a buffer zone. They were going to have democratic elections at that point.
Yeah, but James, I think that the fact that Britain is just no longer a first-rate power and America is.
At this point,
aside from anything else, I think there's a shift in the power balance here, simply in terms of material, of men, of resources.
yeah.
And that naturally that the US naturally is going to be much more assertive of its dominant position in this relationship by that fact alone.
Yeah, America's been isolationist, didn't really understand the war. It's World War II where America really starts properly takes over from Britain as the global policeman role that Trump wants to walk away from now.
Let's avoid contemporary references as much as we can.
Okay, so we've said it's accurate, it's reliable, it's a diary from the doctor. Again, he's not gonna know the strategic geopolitical relations, but by this point, you can see from the conversations that Stalin and Roosevelt aren't exactly hiding there from Churchill. So even anyone can kind of pick it up that there's clearly some sort of problem. The only person who doesn't seem to realize is Churchill, who doesn't seem to understand why he's not involved. Everyone else seems to. So I'd say accurate, reliable source to this one, as it usually is when it comes up. Yeah.
Okay.
You got to deal with Mr. de Gaulle.
Charles de Gaulle. This is my favorite one.
Yeah.
This is so French, isn't it?
Yeah. Very much.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was de Gaulle who was the bitter and highly emotional one. I don't know.
I'm sure it was
projecting it onto Churchill. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the accuracy.
Yeah.
Is it accurate? I'm not sure.
Do you want me to take?
Yeah,
it's weird because this one's not in the textbook at all. So it's like you'd know the extra when it comes in one of the sources that came out of the other bit. So it's basically like the British freed Madagascar from the Vichy French, and they took and de Gaulle was like, "It's ours, give it to me." And they're like, "No, you've got no men, can't hold on to it." So strategically, we'll look after it. And then he got really, really angry. And of course, like Churchill's backing him to be leader of Free France,
the Free French
at the time, but like afterwards, he's coming through. The Americans wanted someone else. I can't remember who it was exactly.
He really got on badly with the Americans. Charles de Gaulle.
He got on badly with
They hated him.
Yeah,
they couldn't stand him.
This is like so. It's somewhat accurate. This, but can we trust his memory of 14 years earlier about the accuracy of what was said?
But that's provenance, James. Let's not mix accuracy and provenance.
Yeah. Accuracy and content. They did used to have fiery explosives. I mean, Churchill supported him, but they did used to have explosive fights. So it seems fairly accurate. In terms of provenance, do you want to take on provenance?
Provenance, I'd say it's fairly unreliable.
Yeah. Why?
First of all, it's a book. It's his memoir, de Gaulle's memoirs. It's written more than 10 years after the fact. And no doubt there are political. I mean, de Gaulle is president in.
I'm blocking British EU membership. They want my dead body. They won't join till I die. And he held that word. He died in the late 60s.
I mean, it is a source where de Gaulle is proving to his readers that he is in fact the representation of France.
Yes.
That Churchill has no reply.
Well, the date's key. Churchill's just stepped down as prime minister, so there's no consequence anymore to slamming him.
Right.
Because
Right.
Churchill stepped down just before de Gaulle. De Gaulle doesn't publish this if Churchill was still Prime Minister of Britain.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Um, but it is an assertion of de Gaulle's his wish to hang on to French territory and his
Yeah.
rightful claim to be France,
And
to
he's
represent,
looking,
to be the
he,
rightful
3 years
represent.
later, he comes back to be president for 10 years. So he's not president at this point.
Oh,
So
he's not.
I
Sorry, my
guess this
French
is
history
also
is
his way of saying, look, it's me, I did it. No, without me, France
that's
is
right.
in the position. So Churchill's stepping down and de Gaulle is actively campaigning to be president 3 years later. So you
I
can
think
the
yeah.
strategic element.
So provenance
Unreliable.
not that reliable.
No,
Not
he's
reliable.
he's angry. He's upset because they didn't want him to be president after the invasion, and also he's still pissed because in September 1942 their relationship was okay because Churchill was supporting him. Like if you
Yeah.
retroactively, it's only later when Churchill refuses to back because obviously de Gaulle would want the Western Front opened as well because liberating France is his main priority, and then they didn't want him at the end of the war. So both of these things would have upset him, and he's clearly
Yeah.
bitter against the British. I mean, he blocked our EU membership for a long, long, long time, claiming we're the American puppet. So.
Yeah.
But he wasn't wrong in a way though, because he said Britain isn't really committed, they just want the economic bits and they don't really care about it. And then with Brexit, he's kind of de Gaulle's proved right, really. All right, so we're saying that one's pretty unreliable. So if we get to
Okay.
conclusion, we can eliminate B. You agree we can eliminate B and D?
B and D.
Yeah, so we can eliminate those two. Then
Yes.
we've got the problem that source A says is supportive and source C is not. But
Mm.
that's fine because we can explain away the fact that they are still both accurate. It's just that source A is only dealing with the personal connection between Stalin and Churchill, which was good and is accurate. So therefore, that's not a problem.
And it's a different year. I mean, it's
Yeah,
1942 and
yeah,
1943.
yeah. So the
So
relationships
there's
were better.
nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
The sources, I mean, you would say that the sources indicated that the relationships changed
yeah,
between
yeah.
42 and 1943.
Between Stalin, yeah, yeah. And I think the key thing to that was not opening the Western Front, following the Mediterranean strategy. And you can see by source C how that's the one that's caused the difficulties. At the beginning, Churchill was the vital cog between America and Soviet Union, but by Tehran, they could sideline him, and the relationships have deteriorated. So yeah, I agree. His relationships were better earlier on, but also, like, I think he always had a good personal relationship with Stalin all the way through. Because the thing difference between source C to source A is source C is dealing much more with the strategic element of it and the whole greater picture.
Right. Rather than just the personal
Yeah. So I would say,
rapport.
yeah. So I would say in the end, it suggests that he didn't handle it. I would say that the sources mostly suggest that he didn't successfully manage wartime leaders by the end, certainly throughout the course of the war, if you want to put it in that way.
We're being very hard on Churchill, aren't we?
Well, he was,
I feel very
well, these are questions talking about things that he wasn't so good at. He was better at other things.
sure. Okay. Well, anyway, according to the sources that we have, I think that
Yeah.
conclusion is
Yeah.
warranted.
Yeah. But that's all we can work with. All right, cool. Let's go on to the last one then.